Hello, so today we'll be talking about an action potential. What is an action potential, you might ask? Well, we all know that nerves communicate through electrical signals, and that these electrical signals cause us to act and do all the functions that we do. So an action potential is basically an electrical impulse that travels from neuron to neuron until it culminates in action or termination. So when we first begin talking about action potential, we need to know the structure of a neuron, which I have behind me. And let me tell you a little bit about a neuron. So this end right here is called the dendrites and the cell body. And this horizontal bent right here is called the axon, and this end right here is called the axon terminal. So the action potential starts in the dendrites right here, and then it will travel down the axon and into the axon terminal. When it reaches the axon terminal, it will attach to another neuron and start the cycle over again. So when we talk about action potential, we're going to focus mainly on its processes in the axon, because that can travel very long distances in the body, and it's sort of a complicated process. So first we'll start talking about that. So I'm going to show you any non-specific part of the axon. This is any non-specific part, and this is before the action potential will reach it. So as you can see, this outside part is the cell exterior, and this inside part is the cell interior. And if you'll note that the cell exterior and resting potential is positively charged, and the cell interior is negatively charged. Okay, and there you will notice these three structures here. The purple one is the potassium channel, the orange one is the sodium channel, and the red one is the potassium sodium pump. And we'll get more into the last one later, but you might be wondering why there are these sodium potassium channels and pumps. Well, that's because the charge, which you noted earlier, is positive outside and negative inside in resting potential, is caused by positively charged particles, ions. In the resting potential phase, there are a high concentration of sodium ions outside, resulting in the positive charge, which I represent with orange dots. Those are sodium ions. And on the inside, there will be a higher charge of potassium ions, but less, because there's a higher charge outside. Okay, so this is before the action potential reaches it. Once the action potential does reach our part of the axon, a process called depolarization occurs. Okay, so as you can notice right off the bat, there's a negative charge outside and positive charge inside, and the ions are inside. What is that, you might ask? Well, the action potential reaches, it tells the potassium channel to close if it wasn't already, and the sodium channel to open, to allow sodium ions to go inside the cell, which results in the positive charge. And so there's a high concentration of ions inside, being positively charged. And after the action potential passes, which just happens extremely fast, the next process called repolarization occurs. Again, you'll notice that there's a flip in charges. Now the outside is positively and the inside is negatively. Well, when this is happening, first the inside will remain positive, but slowly it will switch because the ion's leaving. And as you notice, there's potassium outside and sodium inside. And that is because the potassium channel will now open and the sodium channel will close, resulting in the potassium ions to leave and eventually cause the outside to be positively charged. So after the rush of the potassium ion stops, process called returning to resting, because obviously after the action potential is passed, the axon has to return to a normal state to wait the next action potential. The axon maintains resting potential through use of this potassium or sodium potassium pump. If you'll notice, there are 3 slots on one side and 2 slots on one side. That's very important. The 3 slots are where sodium ions will fit, because if you remember in resting potential, there's a higher concentration of sodium ions outside than inside, which means that there has to be more sodium leaving than potassium going inside if there's a higher concentration of sodium outside. So there will be 3 sodiums leaving and 2 potassiums entering, resulting in the resting potential with positive outside, negative inside. Okay, so after this action potential this will continue down the axon for as long as it needs to until it reaches the axon terminal, which once the action potential reaches the axon terminal, it will send an electrical signal to the next neuron in the cycle through a synapse, which I have shown here. So this entire thing is a synapse, and the axon terminal is to the left or right. I don't know if it's flipped or not, but yeah, for this process right here, it's to the left, the axon terminal, and this was reaching to the receiving cell, which is here, and this blank area right here is called the synaptic cleft. So in the axon terminal outreach, there are these things called vesicles, which are these blue circles, and they contain neurotransmitters, which are shown with the little tiny red dots. And once the vesicles reach the synaptic cleft, they will release these neurotransmitters, which they will attach to receptors on the receiving cell. These receptors will create secondary messengers. These secondary messengers are what create the electrical impulse, which is the action potential, and sends it down to the axon and creates a cycle that we went over. And that is an action potential.